They said it was worthless, a rusted old filing cabinet left behind by a forgotten uncle. Even the movers refused to touch it. But what this single mom found inside wasn't junk. It was a secret, a carefully hidden legacy worth $312 million. An unexpected inheritance that would test her strength, her silence, and ultimately reshape her future. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe for more powerful stories like this and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. When Olivia Thompson stepped into that law office, she didn't expect to walk out with a filing cabinet, but that's what her great-uncle Everett had left her after 36 years of life. Not the cottage by the lake she remembered from summer visits. Not the dusty piano he used to play jazz on during rainy afternoons. Not even a photograph. Just a 4-drawer metal cabinet. Too heavy for anyone to care about. "The house has been sold," the attorney said. "Already half distracted. You have until Monday to remove the cabinet. After that, the new owners will dispose of it." "Monday," Olivia echoed, her voice cracking. "That's 3 days," he confirmed flatly. Olivia wanted to scream. She lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with her 6-year-old son. Eli. She waitressed double shifts in a small-town diner just to keep the lights on. She didn't own a car, let alone know someone who could help her haul a 300-pound relic across town. Outside, the November wind was brutal, and Eli clung to her like a shadow. "Mom," he asked, "what's a filing cabinet?" "It's a big metal box full of boring old papers," Olivia replied, forcing a smile. "Is there treasure inside?" She laughed, but her heart broke a little. "No, baby, just old stuff no one wants." That night, long after Eli had drifted to sleep beside her on their shared mattress, Olivia lay awake listening to the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of traffic outside. Her fingers traced the fraying edges of the blanket as her mind replayed every detail of the conversation with the lawyer. A filing cabinet. After everything, that was it. Her great-uncle Everett had been her father's older brother, a quiet, peculiar man who never married, never had children, and rarely visited. He'd been a history professor at a university upstate, an odd, brilliant man with a deep love for antique maps and classic novels. When she was a child, Olivia adored him. He had once taken her to a used bookstore and spent 2 hours teaching her how to tell the difference between a first edition and a reproduction. She remembered that trip more vividly than most of her birthdays, but that was decades ago. Since her parents died in a car crash when she was 17, she'd barely heard from him, maybe a card here and there, a short, stiff note at Christmas. Distance turned into silence. Silence turned into absence. And now, this, his final gift, was a rusting metal box. The next morning, Olivia got to work. She called the few people she could. Her neighbor, Dan, had a van, but it was in the shop and wouldn't be out until Tuesday. Her co-worker Mia offered sympathy, but her back was shot from a previous injury. A local moving company quoted her $320 after laughing at her request to move just one piece of furniture. "Lady, that thing probably weighs as much as your rent," the dispatcher said. "Not worth it for us." Olivia hung up. Her checking account held $134.27, and she still had to make it to Friday. That afternoon, she picked Eli up early from aftercare, saving the $10 fee, and they took the long bus route across town to the old neighborhood where Uncle Everett had lived. The area was like a picture stuck in time. Stately old homes lined the oak-shaded streets, their driveways curved and gates ornate. It was the kind of neighborhood you slowed down to admire, but never expected to live in. Uncle Everett's house stood near the end of the cul-de-sac. A for sale sign hung crookedly in the front yard, already marked sold in red letters. The garden was overgrown, the shutters flaking. It looked smaller than she remembered hollows where porch furniture once sat. Blinds drawn tight. The key the lawyer had given her stuck in the lock, and when the door creaked open, Olivia felt a chill not from the cold air, but from the silence. Dust floated through the beams of fading sunlight. Most of the furniture was gone. The shelves empty. The echoes of memories seemed louder than anything else. "It's like a ghost house," Eli whispered, clutching her arm. "Yeah," Olivia said softly. "It kind of is." The filing cabinet sat in the back study, just like the lawyer said. 4 drawers, dull gray, battered edges. It looked completely out of place in the once beautiful room, surrounded by faint outlines of where bookshelves had been. Olivia tried the top drawer. Locked. Second drawer, locked. Third, fourth, all locked. Frustration surged in her chest. She didn't have time for riddles or locked drawers. She had rent to worry about, groceries to buy, a son to feed. This wasn't a storybook. There was no secret treasure. There were only more closed doors. Eli wandered toward the cabinet and gently ran his hand across it. "Maybe there's something important inside," he said, "like a clue or a map." Olivia gave a soft laugh. Exhausted. Not everything in real life is a mystery to solve. "Buddy, but you said Uncle Everett was smart. Maybe he left you something and just didn't want other people to find it." The words gave her pause. Uncle Everett had always been particular, cryptic, even. She remembered once, when she was 9. She'd cried to him because some girls at school had made fun of her thrift store shoes. He'd knelt down beside her and said, "People miss the most beautiful things because they only know how to look for what's shiny. Learn to see what's hidden in plain sight." Olivia. That's where real worth hides. She'd forgotten that moment. Until now, she let her eyes sweep the room again, really looking this time. She noticed the indentations where books had sat, the familiar stain in the corner where tea had once spilled on the rug. She saw the chess table by the window, the same table they used to play on when she visited, still standing quietly, too small and insignificant to be taken during the estate sale. That's when something shifted inside her. She wasn't just here for an old cabinet. This place, this moment, it felt like a test. A message wrapped in rust and memory. Uncle Everett hadn't just left her a filing cabinet. He'd left her a challenge. Olivia reached for the tape measure in her purse and scribbled down dimensions. She tested the weight, leaned her body against the drawers, felt their resistance. She studied the room like it was a puzzle, not just to unlock the drawers, but to understand why he'd left it to her in the first place. She didn't have a plan yet. No answers. But she had a gut feeling one she hadn't felt in years. Something was hidden here, and she was going to find it. By the time Monday afternoon rolled around, Olivia was running on caffeine, desperation, and pure willpower. She'd called over a dozen more moving companies each. One either laughed at the job or gave her quotes that made her stomach turn. One man actually said, "It's just a filing cabinet. Lady, leave it behind. Ain't worth the back pain." But Olivia couldn't leave it. It wasn't just a piece of furniture anymore. Not to her. So she did the only thing she could. She went back to the house, alone this time, armed with determination and a rusty toolbox she borrowed from the diner's handyman. She had exactly 2 hours before the new owners arrived to begin renovations. The notice on the front door made that crystal clear. All remaining items will be discarded after 5 p.m. Inside, the house felt even more hollow than it had days ago. She moved quickly, heading straight to the study. The filing cabinet sat waiting, unmoved, heavy, silent, defiant. She tried the bottom drawer again. Locked. She crouched, took a screwdriver from her bag, and jammed it under the metal lip. Nothing budged. She braced her foot against the cabinet, gritted her teeth, and yanked. Metal screamed. Then crack! The lock gave way, the drawer jerking open with a violent shudder. Olivia staggered back, heart pounding. Inside were dozens of folders, all perfectly labeled in Everett's neat handwriting. Personal letters, 1980-1990. Investment records. Appraisals. Pending. She flipped one open, expecting. What old essays, bank statements. What she found instead made her knees weaken. Photographs, dozens of them. Each clipped to certificates, detailed documents, and appraisal reports. One photo was of a painting she vaguely remembered from Everett's hallway, muted colors. Worn frame, something she'd never paid attention to. But the paper attached to it said it was an original oil painting from 19th century France. Estimated value $95,000. Another file held a photo of a bronze sculpture. She remembered that, too. Uncle Everett had used it as a doorstop in the parlor. Appraisal $210,000. Her breath caught. She kept digging. More folders. More appraisals. One for an early 17th century manuscript. Another for a Ming Dynasty vase. All items she'd seen around his home. All real. All valuable. The man who everyone thought was just an eccentric old professor hadn't been collecting junk. He had been curating a secret museum. She sat back on the floor, heart racing. Why? Why hide this? Why liquidate it all? Why leave her a locked cabinet full of receipts and whispers? Then she saw it. A false bottom. At first, she thought it was a shadow, but when she tapped the base of the drawer, it sounded hollow. She grabbed the screwdriver again, pried at the edges, and slowly, carefully, lifted the panel. Beneath it sat a single envelope. Old, yellowed, wax sealed with the letter E in red, and on the front, written in Everett's elegant script, "For Olivia, only when you're ready to see." Her hands trembled as she broke the seal. "My dearest Olivia, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've done the unthinkable. You've cracked the cabinet. I knew you would. You always asked the right questions as a child, always saw past the surface. I spent 40 years collecting what the world discarded, not for fame, not for profit, for preservation, because beauty deserves to endure. But this isn't about art. It's about you. I watched your life from afar after your parents passed. I stayed away for reasons I wish I'd explained sooner. Legal messes, greedy relatives. But I never stopped caring. I followed your journey. I saw the strength you didn't know you had. And when I knew my time was short, I began converting everything into something that could help you not just survive, but rise. The rest of the drawers contain the truth, but they require keys, and the keys are hidden in this room, in places only someone who knew me would look. Someone like you. Be patient, be brave, trust your instincts, and Olivia, tell no one. This kind of wealth attracts attention, not all of it kind. You've always been treasure, even when the world overlooked you. Now it's your turn to see it, too. With love, always, Everett. She finished reading, tears clinging to her lashes. All this time, she'd felt forgotten, like no one saw her, like she'd been left behind. But Everett had seen her, planned for her, trusted her. The drawer now lay open, the envelope in her hand, and somewhere in this room, 3 keys waited to be found. Her phone buzzed. 4:27 p.m., 33 minutes until the deadline. She wiped her face, stood up, and looked around the study not as a visitor, but as someone about to uncover the first real hope she'd had in years. Time ticked loud in Olivia's ears. 4:27, p.m. She had 33 minutes to either walk away or fight for the last piece of family she had left. The study was nearly empty. Furniture gone, curtains stripped, shelves bare. But Olivia knew this room better than anyone else alive. She'd spent summers here as a girl curled up in the window seat with library books, tracing the spines of Everett's antique collection with reverent fingers. She knew this room had stories. She just had to remember them. She started with the bookshelves, running her hands across the wood. She searched for anything out of place, loose panels, uneven grooves, hidden hinges. Nothing. She dropped to her knees and crawled along the baseboards, tapping. Still nothing. Then she turned to the old chess table. It had always been there, tucked near the fireplace, where Everett had taught her to think 5 moves ahead. She slid her fingers under the lip, feeling for notches or gaps. One of the legs felt different, just slightly looser than the others. She crouched down and unscrewed the top knob, expecting nothing. But inside was a hollow chamber, and within it, a small brass key. Her heart jumped. She raced to the cabinet and tried it in the second drawer. Click! It slid open smoothly. Inside wasn't just paperwork. It was proof. Certificates of deposit, bank statements, international transfers, stacks and stacks of official documents showing cash assets in the millions. Olivia stared, stunned. $6.2 million in a Swiss account. $4.1 million in domestic investment funds. Another $8.7 million in a long-term trust under her name. She staggered backward, hands trembling. This couldn't be real. It felt like a joke, like she'd been handed the answer to every desperate prayer, and then some. But the pages were real. The numbers were real. Uncle Everett had spent decades quietly converting priceless art into liquid funds, then hiding it in plain sight. Why? Why her? She'd failed so many times. Dropped out of community college, worked dead-end jobs, dated the wrong men, lived paycheck to paycheck, always one broken-down car away from disaster. She wasn't someone people left fortunes to. Except maybe Everett had seen her differently. She looked back at the cabinet. 2 drawers still locked. 2 keys still missing. She checked her phone. 4:39 p.m. 21 minutes. She pressed her palms to her temples. Thinking, where would Everett hide something no one else would think to look? Then she remembered the window seat. Her favorite place as a girl. The one spot no one else ever cared about. She rushed over and ran her hands along the wood paneling. Tap, 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 thunk. A hollow sound. She pressed. It gave way. Inside the small compartment, another brass key. Her heart roared in her ears as she fitted into the 3rd drawer. More documents, but this time, it wasn't money. It was letters. Dozens, maybe hundreds, bound with twine and labeled by year. Each envelope had one name on it. Olivia. She picked one at random and opened it. Olivia, happy 18th birthday. I wish I could be there, but your aunt made it clear I wasn't welcome at the time. I hope you're safe. I hope you're loved. I hope you never forget that you matter. You've always mattered to me. Her breath caught. Another letter, dated the year she got pregnant. I heard you had a son. His name is Elijah. I believe that makes you a mother now. Just like your own strong, determined, full of quiet fire. I know things are hard, but they won't always be. I'm planning something. For you? Tears spilled freely now, blurring the ink on the paper. For years, she'd believed she was forgotten. Alone. She'd told herself it didn't matter that some people just didn't get happy endings. But Everett had never stopped watching, never stopped loving her. He just loved differently, with caution, with distance, with plans too big for the moment. At the very bottom of the stack was a thicker envelope, sealed like the first. She tore it open and unfolded the note inside. The final key is where I taught you your most important lesson. Not about chess, not about history, about worth. Remember when you came to me crying because a girl at school said your shoes were ugly? Remember what I showed you? Not the books. The photo. Go there. She remembered. The photo of her mother as a child. The same picture Everett had kept in a tiny silver frame in his desk drawer. He'd shown her how much she looked like her. Told her she came from strength. From kindness. That photo had been on his desk until the estate sale, and everything not sold had been tossed into the garage. She sprinted down the hall, heart pounding, flung open the side door, and stepped into the cold, dark garage. Dust, boxes, forgotten furniture. She spotted the giveaway box in the corner, filled with junk-rusted frames, cracked mugs, tarnished utensils. And there it was. The silver frame. Olivia grabbed it, turned it over and gasped. Taped to the back, wrapped in yellowing tape, was the final key. She didn't hesitate. Back in the study, she slid it into the last drawer. Click. Inside a stack of safety deposit box keys, each labeled with different banks across the country. Beneath them, a leather ledger titled, Final Accounting, the Everett Thompson Collection. She opened the first page. Rembrandt sketch, sold 12.5 meters Italian sculpture, auction, 8.2 Hurst. Van Gogh study, private sale, 23.1 meters, Ming vase, acquired by museum, 15.7 mest. On and on it went. 40 years of acquisitions and sales, carefully recorded. At the bottom of the final page, total converted value, 312, 840 FMF Thrusso. Zorts. Olivia staggered back. Breath knocked from her lungs. Then the front door rattled. The new owners. She had minutes, maybe seconds, before someone else walked in and saw the fortune she'd just uncovered. She locked the drawers, grabbed the ledger, and shoved everything back into place. One last look around the room. Then she whispered, "Thank you, Everett. I see it now." Olivia barely had time to shove the final drawer closed before the front door creaked open. "Hello," a man's voice called out. "Sharp. Annoyed. This property is now under contract. If someone's inside, you're trespassing." Her pulse spiked. She grabbed the ledger, stuffed it into her backpack, and stood up quickly, trying to slow her breathing. She walked into the front hallway, face flushed, heart pounding like a war drum. A well-dressed couple stood in the doorway, late 40s, maybe early 50s. The man wore a wool coat and impatience on his face like cologne. The woman, more reserved, looked at Olivia with mild surprise. "I'm sorry," Olivia blurted. "I'm Everett Thompson's niece. The attorney said I had until 5 to remove one item. She glanced at the time on her phone. "I lost track. I was just leaving." The woman's face softened. The lawyer did mention a filing cabinet. "That's it. That's all I'm here for." The man scowled. "It's 5:06. The contract says anything left behind after 5 is legally ours. We're renovating. Demolition starts in the morning." "I understand," Olivia said, trying not to sound like she was begging. "Please, it's all I have left of him." The woman touched her husband's arm. "David, it's just a filing cabinet." "It's not the cabinet," he snapped. "It's the principle." "No," she said, firmer this time. "It's just a cabinet. Let her take it." David looked like he wanted to argue, but then he sighed. "Fine. But it's gone by tonight. No exceptions." Olivia nodded quickly. "Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much." Outside, the sky had dimmed to soft orange. Streetlights blinked to life one by one. She stepped onto the porch and made the call she'd been dreading since Thursday. "Dan," she said when her neighbor picked up, "I know your van's in the shop. But is there any chance you could borrow a truck tonight? I'll pay you everything I've got." There was a long pause. "How much is everything you've got?" She looked down at the crumpled tip money in her pocket. $60 and a frozen lasagna. Dan chuckled. "I'll do it for the lasagna. And the story." By 6:45, the filing cabinet was loaded into the back of Dan's borrowed pickup truck. It had taken Olivia, Dan, and surprisingly David's wife, Claire, to lift the beast out of the house and down the porch steps. David remained pointedly uninvolved. It was heavier than she remembered, heavier than any piece of furniture had a right to be. By the time it was secured in the truck bed with bungee cords and blankets, Olivia's arms trembled with exertion. Dan wiped his brow. "You sure this isn't full of gold bars?" Olivia gave a small, breathless laugh. Something like that. Back at her apartment complex. Dan helped her carry it up the narrow stairs to her unit, a cramped second-floor walk-up that smelled of old carpet and overcooked rice. The cabinet barely fit through the door. They had to move her nightstand, push the couch against the wall, and stack Eli's coloring books into a corner just to make room. Dan collapsed onto the floor with a groan. If this thing wasn't cursed before, it probably is now. "I owe you," Olivia said, handing him the promised lasagna. He waved it off. "Nah, you owe me the ending to whatever the hell story this is." Once he left, Olivia locked the door, double-checked the deadbolt, and turned to face the cabinet. It stood like a sentry in the middle of her tiny living room, silent, immovable, sacred. Eli looked up from the blanket fort he'd made on the floor. "Mom, what's in the big box?" Olivia sat beside him, brushing hair from his forehead. Stuff from Uncle Everett. Important stuff. Like treasure. She smiled softly. "Yeah, baby, like treasure." That night, after Eli was asleep, and the city had quieted, Olivia sat cross-legged on the floor with the ledger in her lap. She flipped slowly through the pages. Every sale, every valuation, every deposit meticulously tracked. It wasn't just a fortune, it was a legacy, a lifetime of brilliance and strategy and intention. Everett hadn't collected art to own it. He'd collected it to preserve it. And now he'd passed it to her. At the back of the ledger, tucked behind the final accounting page, she found another note. "Olivia, you're probably overwhelmed." "Good. You should be. This is not something to take lightly. The accounts and boxes are all held in a trust I established 5 years ago. You are its sole beneficiary. However, access is restricted until your 35th birthday, or 1 year after my death, whichever comes first. I know that seems cruel, but I did it for your protection. Wealth, when inherited too soon, ruins people. I've seen it. Friends, colleagues. You need time. Time to prepare. Time to learn. Time to understand that this isn't just about comfort, it's about responsibility. You've already proven you can endure. Now prove you can become." She read it twice, 3 times. Then she did the math. Uncle Everett had died 11 weeks ago. She had 41 more weeks to go. No shortcuts, no early access. Not even $1. The money existed, but it may as well have been on the moon. Olivia leaned back against the cabinet and let the truth settle over her like a weighted blanket. She was still broke, still barely surviving, still had overdue bills and empty cabinets. But now she had hope. And that changed everything. The days that followed felt like walking a tightrope between 2 worlds. To everyone else, Olivia was still the same single mom. Tired eyes, uniform smelling faintly of fryer oil, showing up to her 6:00 shifts at the diner with a quiet smile and aching feet. Nothing about her life looked different. But inside, everything had changed. Every time she looked at that filing cabinet tucked awkwardly between her kitchen table and Eli's art supplies, she felt the weight of the truth pressing against her chest. $312 million. and not a penny of it could be touched. 41 more weeks. She could survive that. She had survived worse, but now the hardest part wasn't the struggle, it was the knowing. Knowing the money existed, knowing the pressure valve was just out of reach, knowing that her life was already changed, even if the world hadn't caught up yet. So Olivia did what survivors do. She adapted. She started going to the library after every shift, not to escape, but to study. She checked out books on financial literacy, trust law, tax strategies, investment management. She learned terms she'd never even heard before: compound interest, diversification, donor-advised funds. She created spreadsheets. She wrote lists. And late at night, when Eli was asleep, she opened the second drawer again and reviewed every document until she could recite account numbers in her sleep. She also started dreaming again. Not just the kind you do when your head hits the pillow, but real, tangible dreams. A home with a yard, a reliable car, a room of Eli's own with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. The kind of life she'd stopped believing she could build. But the dreams didn't stop there. As she read more about philanthropy, she began envisioning things that extended beyond herself. A housing program for single moms, a scholarship fund for first-generation college students, an art endowment at the university where Everett had taught, because he hadn't just left her money, he'd left her a map, and she intended to follow it. But growth doesn't come easy. February hit hard. The radiator in her building gave out, and the landlord refused to fix it. "You want heat? Buy a space heater," he said, before muttering about rent being late again. Olivia scraped together what she could bought a cheap heater with grocery money and spent 2 weeks serving grilled cheese and ramen for dinner. Eli didn't complain once. Still, the cold was brutal. Some nights she and Eli wore coats to bed, huddled together under every blanket they owned. Olivia would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, teeth chattering, knowing that a fortune sat just a few feet away inside that cabinet, and still couldn't help her. She called the trust lawyers again, begged, quietly, with dignity. "Please," she whispered, voice cracking. "I don't need luxury. Just a working heater, a safe home for my son." But the answer was always the same. "Miss Thompson, your uncle was extraordinarily protective. The trust cannot be touched until the specified date. To break that would be to compromise everything he built for you." So she endured, because that's what Olivia had always done. And then something shifted. One icy afternoon in March, Olivia came home to find a small white envelope slipped under her door. "No return address. No stamp." Just 8 typed words. "We know about the money. We should talk." Her stomach dropped. She locked the door, pulled Eli close, and spent the rest of the night pretending nothing had changed while every cell in her body screamed that everything had. The next morning, she called Patricia, the lead attorney on Everett's trust. Patricia didn't sound surprised. "The estate's size triggered public disclosures," she explained, "and while we've shielded your identity as much as possible, people notice patterns. Someone did their homework. Are we in danger?" "Not necessarily, but from now on, Ms. Thompson, I'd recommend caution. Don't confirm anything. Don't speak to strangers about your uncle. Assume that anyone asking questions has motives." It wasn't paranoia. It was reality. Olivia took the warning seriously. She became quieter, more watchful. She started walking Eli to and from school herself. She varied her routes, changed her routine, refused interviews from local journalists sniffing around Everett's name. She was no longer invisible, and that terrified her. But it also clarified something deep inside her. She was no longer surviving. She was preparing. The pressure that had once crushed her now forged something sharper, more defined. She stopped apologizing for needing help. Accepted rides from co-workers. Let the church pantry fill in when groceries ran low. But behind closed doors, She continued building, learning, planning, sharpening. She wasn't just waiting anymore. She was growing. One night in April, after another cold dinner and a long bath with Eli filled with laughter, Olivia sat in front of the filing cabinet and opened the third drawer, the one with all the letters Everett had written, but never sent. She pulled out a small envelope labeled, "If you're losing hope." Inside was a single sentence. "What you're enduring now is not the end. It's the weight that proves you're strong enough to carry what comes next." She pressed the paper to her chest, eyes stinging. Because somehow Everett had known. He'd seen her not as the girl who had nothing but as the woman who would one day carry everything. And she was beginning to believe it too. It was raining the morning Olivia Thompson became a millionaire. Not the romantic kind of rain that taps gently on windows, but a cold, gray drizzle that soaked through your coat and turned sidewalks into mirrors of dirty puddles. She stood at the window of their small apartment, still the same creaky second-floor walk-up with peeling paint and thin walls, and watched Eli eat his cereal in silence, humming softly to himself between spoonfuls. He didn't know what today was. To him, it was just a Tuesday. But for Olivia, this day had been burned into her bones for nearly a year. 1 year since Everett passed. 1 year of waiting, enduring, growing. And now it was time. At exactly 9:17 a.m. She stepped into the marble-floored office of Wright and Keller, the firm that had managed Everett's trust. Her boots left faint prints on the polished tile, her coat damp from the rain. But her spine, straight, her hands steady. She wasn't the same woman who had cried in this office 8 months ago, begging for rent money and space heater funds. Now, she walked in like someone who knew her worth. Patricia met her with a soft smile and a binder thick enough to stun a horse. "Miss Thompson," she said, standing. "As of this morning, the trust terms have been satisfied. We are prepared to transfer full control of all accounts, holdings, and assets into your name." Olivia's voice barely made it out. "All of it?" Patricia nodded. "All of it." Then she slid a single sheet of paper across the polished table. Olivia stared at it, heart pounding as she read the final valuation. $314.2 million. Somewhere far off, a clock ticked. The room was silent, reverent, like a cathedral. She signed her name. And just like that, everything changed. But Olivia hadn't come just to claim money. She came with plans. For months, she had filled notebooks with visions, not of yachts or diamonds or private islands, but of impact, legacy, dignity. She turned the page in the binder. "I want to establish a foundation," she said. 3 branches. Patricia blinked, then leaned in. 1 emergency financial aid for single mothers on the verge of eviction. 2 funding for arts education in underfunded public schools, especially in places like the one I grew up in. 3 scholarships for first-generation college students, people like me, who never made it the first time, but still dream. The room fell quiet again. This time, not from shock, but from something heavier, respect. David Keller, usually the most stoic man in the room, gave a small smile. "You've thought this through." Olivia nodded. "I had time." That afternoon, she picked up Eli from school like always. He was wearing mismatched socks and had a marker stain on his cheek, proudly clutching a paper with a gold star drawn by his teacher. "I remembered all the planets in order," he said. "Even Neptune." "That's amazing," Olivia said, lifting him into her arms. "You know what else happened today?" "What?" She paused, kissed the top of his head, and said, "We get to go home now. For real." 3 weeks later, they moved into a modest, sun-filled house with creaky hardwood floors and a yard full of dandelions. Olivia didn't buy a mansion. She bought peace. There was a room just for Eli painted navy blue, stars on the ceiling and a tiny office tucked in the corner of the house, where the old filing cabinet now sat like an honored ancestor. She kept it not for the money, but for what it represented. A man who believed in her when no one else did. A legacy built not on excess, but on love disguised as logic. A door she chose to open when the world told her to walk away. 6 months later, she stood before a crowd at the grand opening of the Everett Thompson Foundation for Opportunity and Art. The banner flapped in the wind behind her. Cameras flashed, but Olivia wasn't nervous. She wore a second-hand blazer and shoes that still pinched a little at the heel, but she stood like someone who had earned this place. She took a breath and spoke. There was a time not long ago when I was invisible. I worked 2 shifts and still couldn't pay rent. My son and I shared a bed. I thought, that's just how life was going to be. But someone saw value in me even when I didn't. And he left me not just a gift, but a challenge. I'm not here to hoard wealth. I'm here to redistribute dignity, because I know what it's like to have none. I know what it's like to need help and get judgment instead. So we're going to do things differently. We're going to see people, really see them, and we're going to lift them up not with pity, but with possibility. Applause broke like thunder. In the front row. Eli grinned proudly, holding a handmade sign, "My mom is a world changer." That night, back at their quiet little home, Olivia tucked him into bed. "Mom," Eli whispered, sleep tugging at his eyelids. "Are we rich now?" Olivia smiled softly. "Yeah, baby, we are. But not just with money," she added, brushing hair from his forehead. "We're rich with purpose." And for the first time in her life, she truly believed it. The greatest treasures in life are rarely wrapped in gold. Sometimes, they come disguised as burdens: a rusted filing cabinet, an empty bank account, a string of sleepless nights. Sometimes, they look like the people society forgets: single moms in quiet apartments, overworked waitresses, kids who dream under leaking roofs. But value doesn't vanish just because the world doesn't see it. Everett didn't leave her money. He left her the chance to see herself through his eyes, capable, resilient, rare. And when the moment came, she didn't hoard the light. She became it. Because true wealth isn't found in locked drawers or trust funds. It's found in what we choose to do when we finally believe we deserve better. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe. We share stories that remind us being overlooked doesn't mean being unworthy.